Like, I can already feel like you guys are gonna like do cool stuff.
Into the motive.
Just being good to one another.
Yeah, you guys are doing a good thing here.
The people at the top collaborate, and the people that are at the bottom compete.
Yeah, it resulted in me shooting him.
I was charged with 109 and a 50.
Ultimately, you'll get to where you want to go if you push yourself enough.
I genuinely love this conversation.
I love the Motive Podcast.
Welcome back to the Motive Podcast. I'm your host, Leo Kosuch. Alongside me is my co-host, Kyle Cohen. And guys, joining us today, a legend in the running community, former chief running officer for Runner World Mag, and one of the few people in the world to run races on all 7 continents, an author and a jack of all trades. Guys, please welcome a very special guest, Mr. Bart Yasso. Thank you for being here, Bart.
Oh, thank you, Leo. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kyle.
It's thank you for letting us use your space here. We're up in your space here in Pennsylvania, and we're happy to be here.
Oh yeah, enjoy.
And what year was this house built?
This house was built 1749. If you can imagine, the house predates the country.
Wow.
By 27 years.
Do you have any history on the house, like who lived here or anything like that?
Other than this area was a gateway from Bethlehem, which was founded in 1740, to Philadelphia, which is earlier. I don't know the exact date that Philly uses, but so this was like a gateway for to go from Bethlehem to Philadelphia.
Okay, interesting. So I want to start. Well, first of all, let's get into. So you're retired from the running world. What does Bart Yasso's life look like now? Many people may be wondering what's the day in the life look like now. Yeah,
I'll tell you, my 31 years at Runner's World, I traveled nonstop all over the world. So to be retired now, it's a joy not to be under all that pressure to travel. I absolutely, when I was doing it, I loved every minute of it. But when I got away from it, when I retired, I realized how arduous it was to just constantly be in a hotel or an airport. And, stuff goes wrong all the time when you have no control over it. And that's the thing about travel. But now I still align myself with a few events that are run by good friends of mine. And, I go to a few events, but it's a tenth of what I used to do, or even not even close to what I used to do. I used to be gone all the time.
How many airline miles would you think you have? Did you fly on one airline?
No, because I did a lot of international travel, so I was on a lot of different airlines. But I used to have a lot of miles. I don't anymore, but I did have a ton of miles that I was able to, use years ago. Right.
All right. So I want to start before we get into the travels and the running and everything. What was the early life like? What was your family dynamic growing up? As a kid, school, all that good stuff.
Yeah, that's a good one, Leo. So I was one of 7 kids. I was the middle child, and a middle child is supposed to be the misfit. I lived up to that very much so. My family would all want to go to the beach, and I would say, no, I want to go up to the mountains, and they would want to duct tape me to my mouth shut because everybody wanted to head to the Jersey Shore as kids. So it was always, and then my older siblings were, scholar athletes, and I did not live up to any of that. But, I found my calling later in life when I turned 30, and I had a dream, literally a dream job for 31 years.
Right. What would you say your high school life was like as a kid? Like, how did you enjoy school?
I never liked school because I would be in the class and I would just want to be outside. I'd spend the whole day thinking, how do I get out of this building and escape? I always felt like I was trapped.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that I wasn't a good student. I just did not enjoy it. I enjoyed it a little bit more when I got out of Catholic school and did my last 2 years of high school in a public school. And there was a little more freedom and a little more creativity in the public school system than there was in the Catholic school system. So it was a little bit better, but I still looked out the window every day and wanted to escape and be outside.
Yeah. So did you do any sports in high school or anything like that?
I did. There's a football trophy right there because we were the champions.
Oh, right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, St. Sonny's a football trophy there, but yeah. But I did, and I played on basketball. I was on the basketball team, but I was short and not good at it. And then, but they didn't, they didn't cut, or maybe they cut it to like 12 or 15 people, so I was able to make the team. And then intramural wrestling I did, but then I just got I started partying too much, and I thought that was the cool thing to do, and I did that for a couple of years and said, no, this is not the cool thing to do, and I don't want to do this the rest of my life. And that's when I made that change. And luckily, my brother George, who was more like a father figure to me, he was the one that convinced me. I started the running on my own in like 1977. But my brother George was the one that convinced me I could be good at it if I really put my mind to it and wanted to be good at it. I didn't believe him, but he was right. So I really owe it to him. All I got out of running, without my brother George, he was that guiding light to set me the right direction. He knew I had to do the hard work, but he got me going in the right direction. And I was very lucky that he was a father figure to me.
That's awesome. So what age did you find running at? Like when was that?
20. Was almost 22 years old.
Okay.
Just about to turn 22, and I used to see a neighbor run, a guy by the name of Richard Metzger. I used to see him running, and he always looked happy out there. And I thought, wow, he's got it figured out. He goes out for a 3-4 mile run every morning. I see him, and I thought, that's got to be me. But then I ran a mile, and I thought, man, a mile's a long way to go. How does he run 3 or 4 miles? But eventually you stick to it, and you can do a mile, and then you do 2 miles or 3 miles, and you go from running twice a week to 3 times a week, and then that stepping stone. You just keep getting better, and that's what happened to me. I just kept getting faster and running more miles, and I didn't think it was possible. I really wish I could have taken a selfie in 1977 when I went out for that first run, because I had long hair and a beard and cut off jeans and a belt and like a Budweiser T-shirt and a pair of Keds. But that was the start.
Yeah.
So
right.
we all started. I don't care where you are. I don't care if whatever sport you're in. Everyone has a humble beginning, because no one you just don't. Your first run, you don't go win a marathon, or in football, you don't make the all-pro team from nothing. You got to make strides as you go, and running's no different.
Yeah, 100%. Where was your kind of like career path looking like at that time? Like getting like you got into running, but what were you doing with your life?
So I was thinking, as I got into running and realized I did have some talent to do it, and then the triathlon scene started happening in the early 80s. So I actually thought triathlon was my better way, because I was much better on the bike than I was running. And so I was winning the local triathlons, and I thought I could be a pro triathlete for a living. That didn't work out, because there just wasn't enough money in the sport to survive. So I was always working odd end jobs, and then riding my bike and swimming and running all the time. And but then the job opening came in '87 at Runner's World, and I realized when I got the job it was a golden opportunity that I could not pass up, and it was just that, it was just perfect timing for me. And I just remember committing to myself that I'm going to work harder than not everyone at the magazine, not everyone at the company, our parent company, Rodale at the time. I was going to outwork everyone in the industry. That was my goal. I only ever said that to myself when I got the job, and I worked pretty hard at it.
Yeah. Before we get into Runner's World, what about the triathlon? I want to ask you.
Yeah.
Was there like, so I was talking to a couple triathletes over the past weeks, like a couple Ironman runners.
Yeah.
And because I kind of want to do like I want to do a half Ironman or a half triathlon or something.
Yeah.
Eventually on my radar, and the swimming is what it scares me the most.
Yeah.
And is it like what am I trying to say here? The swimming.
You're a smart man. The swimming isn't fun unless you can be in the lead of the swim. The swim's like being in a dogfight while you're swimming.
Yeah.
When you go to Hawaii Ironman, you feel, okay, I qualified for the World Championship. I'm in Hawaii, and You go down to the beach and it's the size of this living room, and this living room is not big, and that's, you know, last time I did Hawaii was in 2000, and I believe there were 1,800 athletes qualified for the World Championships, and 1,800 athletes just jump in the water at the same time in a little area, and you just get caught up in this froth of madness and just head out to this boat that you then swim around and then come back. But there is the swim is hard. There's no doubt about it. Once you get on the bike, not, you know, as long as you keep your bike upright, nothing's going to happen. And then the run is just it's just the third part of the thing, so it's hard because it comes later in the race. But you don't, you know, nothing's gonna happen to you on the run. But the swim is a bit crazy, unless you're really good and you're up in the front, and then you're not in the crazy froth. But it seemed like I was, you know, I would say there were like 60% to so of the people were behind me, and you know, so that meant 30+% are in front of me. So it was I was in the froth, but you just fight for your space, and you know, it's interesting in Hawaii. You swim out to this, you know, straight out to the boat and go around the boat and back. And I just remember, I don't know how people knew my name that were on this boat, and they were drunk already. It was the race starts at 7 a.m., but I think that boat goes out at like 4 in the morning and takes all these VIP people out there, and they got a cool spot. They watch the sunrise, and then all the athletes swim right around. So I just remember people screaming my name, and I'm going, how do these people know? Like, you got goggles on and a cap and a wetsuit. I don't know how. Or maybe in Hawaii we didn't have a wetsuit. I don't think you can do a wetsuit in Hawaii. It all depends on the temperature of the water. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
No, maybe we did. I don't remember if we had wetsuits on or not. But having a wetsuit, if you do a triathlon with a wetsuit, does make it a lot easier because it gives you buoyancy, and it really helps if you're not a really good swimmer.
Okay, interesting. When did you do your first like marathon in general?
First marathon was 1980.
Okay.
And then first triathlon I think was 82 for sure, 82. And first marathon was 1980.
Okay. Where would you say you were finding the motivation and discipline to run and do these endurance races, and where do you still find it at this age?
Yeah, so where does that motivation come from, or that motive, as in your podcast? Yeah, you know, I was one of those people that I had to turn myself down and make sure I didn't overdo it, because I was always focused and ready to go. You know, if they said, today you should run 6, I would try to run 8. If go on the bike ride, if they said, you know, do 40 miles today, I would do 60. I was always a little over the top, trying to just hit that next level. But I never had a problem with motivation. It was more, like I said, I had to tune myself down a little bit because I didn't want to get injured, and I wanted to do it for a long time. Because otherwise I would have burned out if I just kept that crazy pace all the time. But you just do some downtime, and you know, some point where triathlons are all, you know, you got like a 6-month window where you're doing triathlons, and then you can chill out for a couple months and not go crazy.
Yeah. How important is the recovery, would you say, and what are your biggest tips for recovery?
Yeah, recovery is paramount, because I know it really, to try to, the runners I coach that have success, that really listen to what I'm coaching them to do, to tell a runner that if you run slower you will become faster, is so counterintuitive to a runner. They look at you like you're crazy, but it really is true. If you slow down on your easy days and allows you to run faster on the quality days where you're trying to do a faster workout, you get faster. But you really got to back off on those easy days. And that same thing goes for the bike. I don't know so much about the pool. I was doing a fair amount of swimming, because you got to be ready to swim 2.4 miles when you do the Ironman, but I was never really technical about my swimming. I would just get some laps done and, you know, maybe do some pickups in the pool, but never anything as scientific as I would do with what I would do with cycling or running.
Right.
That's interesting. So why is that with running? Why is running slower?
Yeah, so if you So if you run slower, your body recovers. You get the endurance, but your body recovers, and then you can run faster on the days where you want to go to a track and do a speed workout or a hill workout or a longer run.
Okay.
But yeah, dialing back, because so many people are just that type A personality. They want to set a record every day, and you just can't do that. You really have to. It's good to go out for the run, but if you go at a slower pace, it pays off 2 to 3 days later when you want to run a track workout or a faster pace.
And then you will have those days where you are really pushing the limits after those
Yes.
rest days.
Yeah.
It's interesting because like if you're like a sprinter or something like that, I feel like the goal is to always like push the limit, always beat that time, always. I feel like it might be a little bit different, or any like weightlifting.
Yeah, and the sprinter don't have to do as much mileage as a distance runner does. But even still, they definitely go on easy days, and then they save their real fast sprint days for when it counts.
Right. Over your career, what injuries, like, have you been faced injuries?
Yeah, so I was really lucky. I was not injury-prone person. I had very few injuries.
Okay.
I had more problems from Lyme disease, which isn't related to like a running injury. But
Really?
yeah, but I contracted Lyme disease in 1990, and I didn't even know what it was. And
Okay.
it took doctors 3 months to figure out what was wrong with me. And I really went downhill quickly. It really affected my running. But then I got back and started running well again, but then I had another bout of Lyme, and that messed me up even worse. So it seemed like every time I contracted a new infection, I got worse and worse, and it entered like my central nervous system, and I was pretty rough shape for quite a while, and it still affects me today. But these days I don't really look at the watch or the pace I'm running. I just go out there and enjoy the day and enjoy the run, and see people out there that I know, and they always say to me, "You're still running?" It's so funny and I go, "Yeah, I run slowly, but I absolutely, the joy has never left me. The speed has left me, the distance has left me, but the joy is still there."
That's awesome to hear.
So doesn't Lyme disease ruin your energy? Is that part of it?
Part of it, yeah. From when I beat my neurologist, my family doc, and my Lyme disease specialist doc, all three of them, and they don't know each other, but all three of them said that I literally have all the symptoms of people that have MS. So part of it is the body breaks down and you're weak some days you're not. Every once in a while I go out for a run and I really feel good. And I'm like, wow, this is how it used to be. But it's rare when I get those days. But it is more, you really are weakened by the disease. And it's, you just have to accept. I go out and I know what's going to happen in that first half mile, whether I can feel good and really get a stride going, or I'm really going to struggle. So if I can feel I'm really going to struggle, I just make it a shorter run and be happy. If I occasionally get those days where I actually feel pretty good, I run a little bit further and tackle on pick up the pace a little bit, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have your books. You have a book with National Geographic coming out soon.
Yes. Yeah, it's coming out in April.
Okay, in April.
15th is the date.
100 runs of a lifetime.
100 runs of a lifetime, which...
What's going to be shown? What are the people going to get to see with that book? And tell us about, the crazy adventures over traveling all 7 continents and running the world.
Yeah, Leo, it's... So the first thing you got to do is... So first off, National Geo called me up and asked me to do this book, 100 Runs of a Lifetime. So the first thing I said is it 100 runs of my lifetime or 100 runs of a lifetime? And they said, no, it's 100 runs of a lifetime. So there's actually a couple runs in the book, couple races and a couple runs that I've never done.
Okay.
I've run in the area, but I've never done the official like rim to rim to rim at the Grand Canyon. So I like that there was a couple that that I've never done, because then now I have that motivation once this book comes out to do a couple of these that I've never done. But 92% of the book are races that I have done. So first thing is to narrow it down to 100. And I run so many races and all over the place. It was hard to do. And, I certainly wanted it to be, since National Geographic is such a global imprint, I won in a lot of races that were in Africa and Asia, Antarctica. So I wanted that flavor of all over the world. And then you got to create what we call the book map, get it down to 100, and then go from there. So the hardest part was to get to get 100 down, and then start writing the manuscript from there. But there's some runs that I've done that are just etched in my mind. Running out of I know, Leo, you mentioned you want to go to Africa. There's a place in Tanzania called the Ngorongoro Crater. It's 13 kilometers around, 18 and a half miles roughly. And that's a depression. It's about 1,500 feet deep. And so one time I was in the crater, and all the elephants, all the animals of Africa are in the crater except for the giraffe. The giraffes are afraid of the steep downhill and uphill, so they don't go down there. But all the other animals are down there. And so it's like it's like a mini Africa in Africa. It's almost like a snow globe of Africa. You go down in the crater floor and you get to see all the animals, and then you're in this pretty setting. And they don't let you out of your little vehicle that you have, like a Jeep, to go on the safari tour. And so I convinced our guide that to let me run out of the crater. He wasn't happy about it, but it's amazing what some rupees will do. And I said, I'll stay really close to the vehicle, and I'll jump in if we see it. If we run into some animals that aren't going to be nice to me. And so he committed to it, and I ran out of the crater, just up this sheer wall. It was so beautiful, and then get right to the top, the rim of the crater, right at sunset. It was just an unbelievable run. So it's things like that are etched in my mind. And I remember being in Darjeeling, India, and there's a run you could do from a town near Darjeeling, a town called Menapajang, up to a town called Sandafu. And you're right on the border of Nepal and India, and you get up to this town of Sandafu, and you can see four of the 5 highest mountains in the world.
Wow.
The only place where you can get that view is to run the Sandafu, and it's just a pretty nice climb. And then you can see Everest and Kanchenjunga, which is the 3rd highest peak. Of course, Everest the highest. And then you see Maklu and Lhotse, which is the 4th and 5th highest. The mountain that you don't see is in Pakistan, which is K2, which is the 2nd highest.
Right. But
to do a run and stop and then have a view of the 4 highest peaks in the world, and it's supposedly the only place you can get that view. That was a very special run. And right outside the little town of Sandafu, there was a stupa, which is a Buddhist prayer area, and they tend to be around and in a spot where there's a beautiful view. And so I was up there, and I thought I was asking a good question, but the Buddhist guys looked at me like I was crazy. I asked them how often do they come up here to pray, and they looked at me like I was crazy, and they said twice a day, every day. And I said, like, rain, snow, that doesn't matter. They're there. So wow. I should have been thinking like a Buddhist. I was shocked when he said that, but I realized that was a really stupid question to ask these guys. And they were there, ready to pray for the evening prayer.
Okay. Yeah.
But things like that are just, the book is, but it does also have like the Boston Marathon and many races that people are familiar with. But it's not all races. It's runs that I've done in special areas that just are etched in my mind that I can't forget about.
Wow. Yeah. And speaking of Everest, so there is an Everest marathon, right? That you did.
There is an Everest marathon. Yeah, I think there's actually 2 races that call themselves the Everest Marathon. But yeah, it's one of them is part of a stage run where they do 100 miles, and the first day of it is 26.2, and you see Everest the entire time you're running. And then there's another one that goes from the Sherpa hangout called Namche Bazaar. It actually goes from Everest Base Camp down to the Sherpa hangout called Namche Bazaar, which is it's a cool place, and Everest is a beautiful place to go for some high altitude running. You're up. I was doing some runs that I was at elevation 17,500 feet, even up to like almost 18,000.
Wow.
Pretty serious elevation to do some running at. But
Yeah.
I love going to a place where there's no paved roads and not even roads for Jeeps. Everything is done by foot. And if there's stuff that has to be carried, it's on a yak. You see these big yaks walking by with all, whatever the Nepalese are going to go into a village and sell, they have it on the back of a yak. So I just love that everything is done by foot. In fact, one of the trips, my guide, he walked 2 days to meet me to walk up to Everest Base Camp. He walked from his house 2 days, and then he got there, and then he was going to start to get paid. And I said, no, I'll get paid for the 2 days you walked here. I said, there's no one in America that would walk 2 days just to get to a job site. This guy did. I mean, he walked 2 days, and then when I was ready to leave and fly out of this little town called Lukla, the Lukla airport, known as the most dangerous airport in the world. So I get on the Lukla and on the plane, and I told the guy, I said, go home to your family. It's going to take you 2 days to get home. We've been together for a month. And he wouldn't leave until the plane took off and disappeared. And then he was so loyal. He kept telling me, I'm not leaving until the plane takes off and you're gone. If something goes wrong with the plane and you don't take off, he said, I'm still here for you. And I thought, wow, it's unbelievable. And I really fought with him to leave and walk home. And he said, no, I'll be all right. Don't worry.
That's great. That's
yeah.
awesome.
But then he had, we worked together for a month, and then he, after Lukla, he walked 2 days to get back home to his family.
Wow. Yeah. And speaking, so you talked about the animals in the crater in Africa. I think I saw you telling a story about some rhinos.
Yeah.
Can you tell that one?
Yeah, the rhino chase was in Nepal, on the right in what they call the lowlands in Nepal, towards the border of India, and a place called Chitwan Park, which is a reserve for tiger and rhinoceros. And this guy Jim, he was convinced to do this trail run there, and he thought it was a great idea, but he convinced me to go with him and do a test run to make sure it's a great idea. And then we found out it's not a great idea, because we were like 3 miles into the run, and there was a rhino in the middle of the trail that we were on. Now, luckily, we had a Jeep that was following us, and a gentleman taking pictures. And, this rhino stops dead, sees us, and then turns towards us, and then was ready to charge if it felt it should charge. And it only took me a couple seconds to run back and get in the Jeep and get in the back part of the Jeep. But I got this picture. There's myself running and my buddy Jim, and the rhino's in the middle of the picture. And then the second picture's taken 2 seconds later, and you can see I'm already gone, and Jim's just starting to get out of the picture. So I had that instant where I just had to be faster than my buddy.
Right.
And I got to the back of that Jeep pretty quickly, because the rhino got serious. The rhino really squared at us, put his head down, and that's like the last tail sign. Once the head comes down, they're coming at you.
Wow.
But we were out of harm's way by then.
That's crazy.
Yeah, they're massive, right?
They are massive, and they're fast. Most people don't realize the hippo is the most dangerous of all the animals that you encounter. When they're on land, they are really fast, and they are really protective. And they think the entire river is theirs. So if you come near the river, they're ready to attack. Mm-hmm. And they kill more tourists than any other animal in Africa.
Really?
Yeah. They're very aggressive, and they're very protective. And they consider the whole river their turf. And they're fast in water, and they're fast on land, which is
they're fast in the water too. Yeah,
they are fast in water. I can't believe it. We were in a boat in the Zambezi River, and I couldn't believe how fast. He was our guide. He was hitting the engines, getting away from these rhinos in the river, and they were going so fast. Like first I thought it had to be a different rhino. There's no rhino that could go that fast. And I found out. I kept my eye on it. And no, it was the same rhino. They can really move in water. It's amazing. And they can move on land very fast.
Yeah. Yep. So Antarctica.
Yes.
It's the continent that few have been to.
Yes.
And running a race there. So what was the process of finding a race in Antarctica, getting to
Yeah.
Antarctica, and doing it?
Yeah, so a company called Marathon Tours that led groups to races all over the world for many years. They were the ones, Tom Gilligan, who was in charge of Marathon Tours. He was the one that came up with the idea, okay, there's marathons everywhere. Why not Antarctica? And so he was able to pull it off back in 1995. And I went along with him in 1999. And at the time, I was told that, there's only about 1,000 people that visit Antarctica throughout the year back in 1999. There's more people that go now because there's actually cruise ships go to Antarctica. There were no cruise ships going to Antarctica back when we did the race in 1999. We crossed, so what happens is no matter where you are, everyone meets in Buenos Aires. And once we get to Buenos Aires, we had a charter flight from Buenos Aires to the tip of South America. And then a town called Ushuaia, windy place where the two oceans come together. And then you get on a Russian freighter for 2.5 to 3 days to get to Antarctica from Ushuaia and battle the Drake Passage, which is known as the roughest seas in the world. And sometimes they're not so crazy, and sometimes they are really rough. It just depends. We had a pretty rough going to Antarctica. We had a pretty rough on the way back. The Drake Passage wasn't as rough. But out of, I believe it was 143 runners on our ship, there were only a handful that did not throw up on the way over. It was pretty rough. Yeah.
Why was it a Russian freighter?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
What's the Russians doing?
Yeah, because
in Antarctica?
they're the only people that's what they do for a living. They got a Russian freighter, and they'll transport people from Ushuaia to Antarctica and back, and that's what they make, how they make their living.
Yeah.
I remember getting on the boat and meeting those Russian guys that were in charge of everything, and the guy asked me, what I brought along for seasickness, and I said, I didn't bring anything. And he's like, you didn't even bring like Dramamine? I said, no, I didn't bring anything. And he said, he showed me all the pills he takes, and he had the patch on his, behind his ear. He had all this seasickness. I said, okay, I'm going to be in trouble.
Wow.
But I didn't get sick.
Really?
I didn't.
Were you one of the handful that didn't throw up, you said?
Yes, I was one of the handful, one of the 5 that didn't. But I was not in the best of shape a couple times. I was laying in bed in the fetal position, reading a book, not moving, fighting it.
Really? Would reading a book make it worse, though? Like car sickness?
Yeah, no, I could get in there and just like curl up and read a couple pages and then kind of chill out and then read a couple more pages. It seemed to help me out to focus on something else and try to convince yourself not to get sick, because you could hear other people throwing up, and then the smell goes through the boat, and you're like, oh my God, I'm not gonna make it. But somehow I did make it. I don't know how, and I didn't take anything. I was lucky.
Interesting. How long is a boat ride?
So depending on how rough the seas are, from Ushuaia to where we King George Island, where we hosted the race, was anywhere between 2.5 to 3 days.
Okay.
It just depends on how rough the seas are, how fast they can go. The seas get really rough, they have to dial it back a little bit and literally ride the waves and steer into the waves. It's pretty crazy. And you hear, you're out in the middle of nowhere when you're out in the middle. It's a day and a half either way. And you just hear this metal cracking on the boat. But that's a good thing, because it's expanding so it doesn't fall apart.
Right.
But it scares the daylights out of you when you hear these cracking noises thinking. And I remember I asked the captain if I could go up. I was about 6 levels up from the main base, the main part of the ship. And, I asked him if I could go out in the bow out there and just be in the front of the boat, just see what it's like. And he said, yes, I could go out there if I took a belt and tied it onto a railing and made sure I was secure. So I did that, and I'm out there. And I lasted about maybe 5 minutes at most, because the waves were crashing the front of the ship, and they would go over the top of where I was. And I was 6 levels up
Wow.
And I thought, my God, and the water was freezing.
Yeah, would it smack into you, the water?
Oh my God, it was scary. But I begged the captain to do it. So I said, I got to stay out here at least a couple minutes. Otherwise the guy's going to make fun of me. So I stayed out there and struggled. But then I knocked and said, I got to come back in. And he was just laughing. He knew I wouldn't last that long.
Yeah, I remember talking with my great grandfather who was in World War II, and he said the scariest thing for him was he was just on like a little like crew transport ship towards the end of the war was the typhoons.
Oh,
out in the water, and that was the scariest part.
Yeah, I believe that. So my dad was in World War II in the Navy.
Okay.
And he always talked about it was not calm seas where they were.
Yeah. Yep.
And they really feared a typhoon, but he never talked about a typhoon, but he talked about rough seas.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of the military, so I saw in another interview you did, so going to Iraq on an army base, getting the troops out, running, what was the process of that like, and getting to Iraq, and just the travels are fascinating.
Yeah, so 2009, there was more warfare going on in Afghanistan than Iraq.
Right.
But there were a lot of soldiers at the bases in Iraq. So someone came out with the idea to put on some running races on the bases. So I was requested to be part of it. So I for sure did it. Nothing like going to Iraq in the month of July. 120 degrees in the afternoon, cools off at night to about 105. And we flew into Kuwait, and just a commercial flight into Kuwait, and then transported into Iraq from there. And that's where, once we got into Kuwait, the military took over and transported us everywhere. And we started in southern Iraq and moved north and hit a bunch of bases. And some of the bases were small, where we would do a 5K run. Some of them were big enough that we did a 10-mile run. So it depended on how big the base was and how far we would run. And then it depended on the superior officer, which was always a general, how, what was going on. Did he really want his men and women to be doing this, or, how interested they were in it. And most of the time they were really interested in it. So they would say, and they would send me out. They'd say, okay, on days there wasn't a race, they would send me out and say, okay, I want you 20 guys to keep up with this guy. He's going to go out there and run for about 3 hours. You got to stay with him. And I'd be out there just running, and they would set up a little course, and then they would put snipers here and here and here, so we were safe. And then I would run and run, and all of a sudden, started out there with 20, and then I would look, and okay, 20 turned to 10, and then 10 turned to 5, and I just had to keep going until there was no one left with me. So it was kind of fun to do.
Wow. Yeah.
And, but it was burning hot. I mean, just brutal temperatures.
Right.
But it was, creative fitness, creative camaraderie. We tried not to do a race to say this person's first. We tried to do races that were just everybody was just part of the race.
Mm-hmm.
And we had tons of T-shirts and running shoes, and we had all kinds of prizes to give away. And it was really fun. And we worked all the way up to northern Iraq, and then worked our way back, hitting different bases.
Okay. Did you have any like encounters with anything risky or anything like that?
No, there was. I know one morning somebody said there was a mortar shell went off somewhere, but I never heard it or felt it. I do remember being on a Chinook helicopter, and being on the Chinook, and I would lay on the floor, and the side's wide open, and I would look over the side and look down over the Euphrates River Valley and look over Iraq. And, it's like 3 a.m. We only flew in the dark, and you don't fly very high because you don't want to give them a clean shot to shoot you down. And with the door wide open, there was a guy there with a machine gun, and he was actually strapped to the machine gun. And I have my head down by his feet. I'm looking down over the valleys in Iraq, and he like gives me a kick, and then he motions me to talk to him, and he said, "You're in the worst place you could be." I said, "No, I got this beautiful view. I'm down here on the and he said, "If I start firing, they're going to see the tracers coming out of my gun, and this is where they're going to shoot, and you're right at my feet." He said, "It's not a good place." I said, "Okay." You will never see me there again.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But there was nothing, nothing happened. But we'd be in the middle of nowhere. Someone would pick us up in a Jeep, 2:30, 3 in the morning. We'd be in the middle of nowhere, and all of a sudden these helicopters would come down, pick us up, and take us away. Or sometimes we actually flew on C-130s.
Okay.
And the same thing, we would have C-130s, you didn't have a seat. They said just sandwich yourself between a box of tomatoes and a box of lettuce and just hold on.
Wow.
It was crazy.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, it spoiled me. It spoiled me for commercial travel when you have to be in a seat and be buckled in.
Yeah.
I liked being stuck between two boxes, and I like that feeling of the side wide open. You get the beautiful view. I really like that.
That's awesome. And so one race I want to talk about, which I read about in a book this past spring, is Badwater. So you completed Badwater 146.
Back in the day when it was 146 miles, they shortened the race to 135.
Yeah.
But I did it back in the 80s when it was the true 146-mile race from the lowest point in the contiguous 48 states to the highest point in the contiguous 48 states. And then in between, you just run 146 miles in pretty extreme temperatures.
It sounds like the craziest race, like one of the, like you said, the lowest point in the U.S. to the highest point in the U.S. It's 120 plus degrees.
Yeah.
And for 135 miles.
Yeah, it really is warm. It's crazy. So the lowest point is a place called Badwater, 282 feet below sea level.
Wow.
And it's a warm spot. If you go there in the July afternoon, you just can't imagine how warm it can get. So the race, when I did the race, I was told the race is always the third Wednesday in July, because the third Wednesday in July was always like the hottest day of the year. They would follow the charts. And they said third Wednesday is the hottest day. So that's when they held the race. And the first 75 miles are really warm when you're in the valley floor. When you get out of the valley and start climbing, you get up to some passes that are 5,000 feet. It does cool off. Still in the 100 degrees range, but it does cool off a bit. And then when you get towards, you got a beautiful view when you get to like 100 miles. You can actually see the finish line, the top of Mount Whitney, which is snow-capped. And you can see it, but you still got 46 miles to go. So it's not like Boston Marathon, you turn on Boylston Street and you got 600 meters, you see that finish line banner, you just give it all you got. When you do Badwater in the old days, you get a view of the finish line when you're 46 miles from the finish line.
That's crazy.
You don't start your sprint 46 miles out. It's unbelievable. And it is, and you go from that extreme heat to getting on Mount Whitney, and the last 11 miles up the trail to the top of Whitney, which is the highest peak in the contiguous 48. And then the craziest thing is you finish the race, and the race director's up there, and he greets you, shakes your hand, and all that stuff. And then you have to walk 11 miles back to the trailhead because there's no vehicles or anything allowed on the mountain. So you come for 146 miles, and then you walk 11 miles back to where your car, we had like an RV, where our RV was. And I always tell people, like, there's no runner in the world that would park their car 11 miles from a finish line, even if you're just running a 5K run. Like, he wouldn't say, oh yeah, I'll put my car 11 miles. It'll be nice after I do the race. I got 11 miles to get to my car. It was crazy, but it's just part of doing that race in the old days. Now they now stop at what they call the portals, which is where the trail starts to go up to Whitney. So they stop right there, and that's 135 miles.
Okay. What was I gonna say? Oh, so to get into Badwater, like, they don't just accept anyone. Like, you can't just sign up to Badwater, right? You have to have your list of races you've completed to show you're eligible, and like have people, like, how many people drop during the race, would you say, for Badwater?
Ooh,
And don't complete it.
I don't know these days. I really don't keep up with it as much as I used to, but there's a good percentage of people that don't make it because they do have a cutoff at some point. But when I did it, they were begging people to do it, and that's how I ended up doing it. The race director comes in the runner's world and says, look, we got the toughest race in the world and nobody knows about it because there's only like 6 or 7 runners that do it. And, it's called the Badwater 146. No one knows anything about it. So the whole idea was this race director pitched Runner's World and said, if somebody from Runner's World does the race and you do a story in Runner's World, everyone will know about Badwater. And it'll be, because it's so extreme, it'll be really popular. And that race director was spot on. The only thing was who from Runner's World was going to do it. So I'm in this meeting with the whole staff, and everyone in the meeting said, Bart will do it. And I'm like, at the time, I didn't do any ultras. That was my first ultra, was Badwater. So
Wow.
I really was, I just remember, the thing that I remember the most about Badwater, besides all the natural beauty and all the stuff, I mean, it is really a beautiful place. Death Valley is one of the most unique places in the world. But I remember when the race director said, he had like a little starter pistol. He said, 1 minute to go to the start of the Badwater 146. And that 146 got stuck in my head for a little bit. And I'm like, wow, this race is actually 120 miles longer than I've ever run. And I was like, well, I probably should have thought about this a couple months ago and maybe have run like a 40-mile training run or something. But I remember just telling myself, all the miles you run in your life, this is why you did it. You literally were born to run this race. Just be smart and, run a smart race and you'll get to this finish line. And that's all I remember telling myself. And the next thing I knew, the gun went off and away we go.
And how long did it take you to complete it?
So it was like 60 hours, I think it was. I can't remember exactly.
So how do you do that? Like you
well,
can't
so
take
I
a
had
nap, can you?
I had an RV with a crew, people that I worked with at Runner's World, and they kept tabs on me and made sure I had enough fluids and food. And then we crashed. Everyone crashed at like mile 75, and then we crashed again at like mile 125 because we couldn't get up the mountain because of darkness. They wouldn't allow us. Even if you got up to the trail, they wouldn't allow you to run the trail till sunrise.
Okay.
So we took a break there and then continued on.
When you take a break, you literally you sleep for a little bit, or
Take a nap, get some food in you, get some pizza. Man, going to a pizza place at like 7 o'clock at night and at the 125-mile mark of the race, that was living. And get a little hour, maybe an hour and a half of shut eye and get up to the trail that we're ready to go up the trail as soon as sunrise comes. And the rangers are there. They don't let you go past them till the sun comes up, and then up the trail and away you go. So I think that's why they now stop at the trailhead, because then it's uninterrupted running.
Yeah.
Like it's such a crime when you're feeling good and you're ready to run and the clock keeps going and you just can't go anywhere.
And that was
the rangers will arrest you if you continued on the trail.
Really?
Yeah.
And that was really your first ultra marathon?
Yeah, that was my first ultra.
Isn't that like one of the most extreme?
Yeah, I always tell people, do not do Badwater as your first. You want to do like a 50K, which is 31 miles, and then work your way up to 50 miles. And then maybe 100K, which is 62 miles, and then try Badwater. But it's hard to get in. Like Badwater, you got to have the money. It's an expensive little race to do, and then you have to qualify, prove that you've either done it before or have run 100 milers, or there's different qualifications these days.
Yeah, I was looking at ultras around here. Is there one? I saw one up in like above State College or somewhere up in Pennsylvania, a 100-mile race. Are you familiar with that one at all? I'm not sure exactly
I'm not
what
sure
it was.
which. Yeah, there's one at World Ends maybe, which is near Penn State.
Okay.
But that could be. I think they do a 100K and a 100-miler. Oh, and the one I think you're thinking of is called Eastern States, because the big ultra is the Western States, which is in California, and then someone started one on the East Coast calling it Eastern States. It's a pretty rugged course. You can do. Pennsylvania has rolling hills, but they're endless rolling hills. That's what people in Colorado think, wow, we run up these mountains all the time, but the mountains in Pennsylvania are much different and they're harder. It's harder to just have up and down all the time and rolling hills versus just getting in a groove and do a long, steady climb and then having a long, nice descent like you would have in Colorado. Doing the constant up and down it's grueling. It just wears you out.
Right. Yeah. And speaking of time, so I have to ask you, so did you ever think you would see a sub 2 hour marathon in your lifetime?
Ooh, boy, that's a question. And well, first off, when I first answered it, I said no. That was before these super shoes came along. Because shoes now are making a difference. And that's not me testing shoes and going through all the technology. It's me talking to the fastest runners in the world. And they tell me that the shoes make a difference, that they feel they're running, up to 2 minutes faster than they would without the shoes.
Yeah.
So I think it will happen officially in my lifetime, maybe. But the shoes played a role in it. I think if the shoes didn't come along, I don't think it would have happened in my lifetime.
Yeah, right.
And Kipchoge did it in that makeshift race that they did, which was really not a race.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it has to happen in a certified race.
Okay.
That's a run, not staged by something and set up.
Yeah.
Has to have but now the women have run 2:09. The women's world record just got ratified, official. It is official, where she ran 2:09 at Chicago. I mean, that's unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the time, people keep getting faster.
Do you think the shoes, because there's controversy with the shoes as well.
Yeah.
Are you just kind of, what's your take on it? Do you think this is just the evolution of the sport?
Yeah. I mean, I would think pole vaulting, the poles gotten better over the years, and now they're up to 20 whatever feet they're doing. So, I mean, it's inevitable this stuff comes along.
Right.
To be honest, I wish they weren't allowed, because I really believe in those records that were set over many years, that it's kind of, and well, if you look at cycling, now the bikes are so light and it's such a difference, and of course everyone goes faster.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you control it, or how you say this shoe is all right to use, but this one's not. I mean, where do you draw that line? I really don't. I think it gets hard. So
Right.
I think it was inevitable something like this came along. But again, when I talk to the runners that still race at the highest level and use these shoes, they absolutely say they make themselves faster.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I love watching, speaking of biking, the Tour de France.
Oh.
It's that race just blows my mind every year.
Yeah, the Tour is it's the best. You know? The scenery, the whole mystique of it. I wish they didn't have the drug problem that they have, but it's just I just love the scenery, to be honest. I cycled all over Italy and went up some of the big climbs that they have on the Tour of d'Italia.
Okay.
The Italian version of the Tour de France, and I've ridden my bicycle across the United States twice by myself.
Yeah, so walk us through that.
Yeah. It's so funny that people always say to me, you've run everywhere and you had this great job at running, and I actually say to them, the most fun athletically I ever had in my life was riding my bicycle across the United States twice. And I wasn't racing, but it takes a little bit of athletics to ride across the U.S. in 20 days, do 3,200 miles in 20 days. But I'm telling you, it's a way to see America, where you're not zipping down the interstate, flying and missing everything and only stopping at key landmarks that you want to see. I mean, I got to really spend time with people, because I had to stop and get food and drinks everywhere I was. I was by myself. So I go in and hang out with these people in these mom and pop stores and get some Gatorade and get some snacks, and they would ask me what I was doing, and they just would just shake their head like, you're crazy, but we think it's cool what you're doing. And then people offered me money, people offered me places to stay, and I said, my hotels are already paid for. I don't need any money. I got plenty of money. I'm not, I was just doing it. It was my vacation, actually, both times I did it. But it was just a joy 20 days, you're out there taking it all in, seeing crossing mountain range after mountain range when you do the western. So I started northwest of Seattle and finished just below New York City in Asbury Park, New Jersey. And so the early part, you just constantly cross mountain ranges in that northern section. It's so beautiful. But then eventually you hit the plains and it does flatten out a bit, but it also gets a little windier. And then you get back into the rolling hills when you get into Ohio, West Virginia, and then those tough rolling hills of western Pennsylvania. And then the rolling hills of eastern Pennsylvania aren't as tough as western Pennsylvania. And then nice Jersey's easy to get across, and then finish at Asbury Park and head on home. And that same thing happened both times I did it. When I finished, I rode my bike to work the next day, and everyone at the office said, "There's no way he's going to ride his bike to work. He just rode 3,200 miles in 20 days." And and when I would come in on my bike, they would look at me like, "What is wrong with you?" And I said, there was no way I wasn't going to ride my bike to work today.
Yeah.
I mean, I said, you get so used to it that's all you know.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just you're obviously sore from riding, sitting on a bike seat for 14 hours each day. You get a little worn out, but you actually get in like a groove where you actually feel like you're sitting in a Chase lounge once you get in the groove and get moving.
What was the process of booking all the places you were staying, like your clothing, like how are you carrying everything?
So I had
all that.
So when I got on the plane to fly from New York City into Seattle, my checked luggage was my bicycle, and my carry-on luggage were the 2 packs that would go on my bicycle.
Okay.
So in those 2 packs, I had some gear in case something broke, some spokes, different bike equipment, different tools to fix things, and then I would have change of clothes to go into town to eat dinner, and then change of bicycling clothes, and then rain suit and a warmer, some warmer clothing and summer clothing. You had to have a little bit of everything. And then it's not fun carrying 20 pounds of stuff on your bike because you train without those packs, and you're just so used to holding a pretty fast pace, and those two panniers on the back of your bike slow you down a lot. But it was more fun to do it self-sufficient and solo.
Right.
And then I did the 19 hotel reservations in advance, paid for them, because that was my carrot every day. Because some of the days when temperature is up over 100 degrees and you're up to like 130 miles. So I average about 165 miles each day. So if you're cruising along and you hit 130 miles and you're worn out from the sun and you're hungry, and then you go by a motel that says vacancy and you see it has a swimming pool and there's some dude in a floating thing laying in that swimming pool, and you're like, that could be me. But I had to go to Rapid City or to Worthington, Minnesota, or to wherever I was going, to my hotel, which was paid for.
Wow.
So without that, I think I wouldn't have kept up to the 20 days. I think there were days I would just say, you know what, that hotel and swimming pool, I can't pass it up. I'm gonna cruise in there. And so that was my motive, literally every day, to get to the next place I had to be. And I tell you, people always ask me about the weather. The first trip I got rained on for 1 minute in the 20-day stretch. 1 minute of rain. And then the second time I did it, it was about 30 minutes of rain the entire trip.
Wow.
And the 30 minutes of rain, the second time I did it, was like just light showers. I didn't even put on a raincoat.
Wow.
Or a rain jacket that I had.
What are the odds of that in a 20-day stretch?
Yeah, I always fear that if I did it again, it would rain for 20 days. Because I was really lucky, because there were some major storms. I'd get in and I would turn on the TV and check the weather, and I was like, wow, it's raining here and here, but not where I am. And so I was pretty darn lucky. I did it in 1992 and 1994.
Okay.
So I did it before we had all the technology that we have now.
Right.
So when all the technology came along, and the phone, is cell phone what it is today, and the internet what it is today, I thought, wow, I got to do that bike ride again, because now I know the routes, and I could look at my phone and know exactly to the to the inch how far I am from the hotel or wherever I'm going. And then I thought, you know what, the new technology actually made it not as safe to be out there on your bike, the distracted driver and all this stuff. So it's, as much as I wanted to do it again, and because of the new technology, I actually fought with it being more dangerous. So I just stuck with my 2 rides. I was thinking of going up to Anchorage, Alaska, and then riding from Anchorage to the East Coast. But I never did it. I just was, I know I was fit enough to do it, but I just didn't work out.
Mm-hmm. Do you still have the bike you did it on?
No, the bike I did it on, I don't have anymore. I got a lot fancier, faster bike back in like 2008. So the bike that I did it on twice was not that fancy a bike. So all of a sudden I ended up, I had like 5 bicycles in my garage. And I said, I don't need 5 bicycles. I only need like a mountain bike and my road bike. So the other bikes, I just took to a bike shop and I just said, please give these to somebody that needs a bike.
That's awesome.
And I said, I don't want anything. Just, if you need money from me to fix them up a little bit and sell them, I'll give you some money. And they said, no, we'll tweak them a little bit, make it a lot better, and someone will be happy to get this bike. And we'll make sure it goes to someone that can't afford to buy a bike and but really wants a bike.
That's great.
So my bike's out there somewhere. I hope somebody's riding it.
Yep. You mentioned Italy and France. Are there any races that stand out from like Europe, Italy, France, Germany, anything like that?
Yeah, there's the trail runs in Italy are pretty nice. I just remember this one marathon where our race packet it was full of like packets of pasta and bottles of wine. And I thought, wow, we are really in Europe, because that would not happen in America. You would not get like 3 pounds of pasta and like 6 bottles of Chardonnay in your race packet. And that's all they put in there. They never put any like flyers or anything like that. They literally said, no, this is what you really want, pasta and wine.
That's great.
Yeah, so it's hard. And, like the Rome Marathon is such a beautiful tour of the city. And that I would think is one that's etched in my mind. And when I did Rome, my older sister was there, my mom was there, my niece was there. So it was like 3 generations in my family, which was really cool. Yeah, so I had this awesome picture that I'm pretty sure my niece took. I got to Trevi Fountain, and my mom was there, and I stopped and gave her a hug. And she never saw me stop in a race before, so she was kind of freaked out. She thought, and I said, Mom, I'm not here to set any records. I'm just here to do this, right? Don't worry about it. We got a nice picture together, and I never realized when that picture was snapped 25 years ago that it would be my favorite running photo. But when my mom passed, looking back, that is the coolest running photo I have. And I'm not running, I'm in the midst of a race and giving my mom a hug, and our backdrop is Trevi Fountain, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. So the Yasso 800s.
Oh yeah,
named after you.
Yeah.
Me and Kyle were talking about it. So walk the audience through it. How you got it named after you? What's it like having it named after you?
Yeah.
All that stuff.
What's it like? There's not a day in my life, and there hasn't been a day in my life since the mid '90s that I haven't received a email, text, fax, message on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever they call it now. So every day I hear about Yasso 800s. Most of the time it's positive. Some people don't understand the workout and they don't know how it's used, and it probably doesn't work. It doesn't work for everybody, but it worked for me. But it was Amby Burfoot, the executive editor at Runner's World. He was the one that named them after me, because I went out to do this workout 10 times 800, whatever I averaged the 800 meters in minutes and seconds, I would do in the marathon in hours and minutes. So I was trying to run a 240 marathon at the time. I would do the 800 meter repeats to 2 minutes and 40 seconds. And then in the marathon, run 2 hours and 40 minutes. And it really worked for me. And then Amby said, well, we're going to put it in the magazine, make a big deal about this thing. He said, I think it will work for a lot of people, and it's pretty simplistic because it's just warm up and then do 10 times 800, 400-meter recovery, do a cool down. I said, okay. But he named him after me because of my last name. So he said, you got a very unusual last name. I've never heard about it. He said, I think it'll stick because of the name and because of the workout. I said, okay. So he named them Yasso 800s. And then when the magazine came out in 1993, I thought, okay, it'll be something people talk about for a month. The magazine's out there for a month, and then everyone will forget about it, and it's done. That didn't happen. I mean, I think yesterday, I got 6 messages about Yasso 800s.
Wow.
And and it's been around. It's been around to the general public since 1993. I was doing it ever since I started doing it in 1980.
Okay.
So
wow. Yeah.
But it was just my favorite workout. 10 times 800, 400-meter recovery, easy to do, hard workout, and it just seemed to work for me.
When you say 400-meter recovery, does that mean like you're walking or like just like slower than what?
Just I would call it a jog. You slow down so your heart rate comes down. You just do an easier pace, and then you come around and accelerate into the 800. But it does, doing that recovery jog or recovery run allows your body to keep doing them. If you just tried to run it all out and run longer, that's just like doing a race. You want to do a workout where you're having recovery within the workout, and then that tends to let you push really hard because you're only running 800-meter segments at a high level.
Okay. What is the origin? Where's Yasso originate from?
It's a Slovak name.
Okay.
And according to Ellis Island, my family came in and they spelled it with a J, but they were pronouncing it Yazo instead of Jazo. And so they wrote down a Y instead of a J, and then they came in, and I came a couple generations later, and it's still a Y. But yeah, that's what my family. But all the stuff we did at Ellis Island, that's what we found out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Going back there and going through all the records, they do a great job.
I don't know how to think that my family came over in like 1850, and they can go back and look at this stuff. Like, I'm astonished. But they're expert archivalists.
Right.
They really are.
Yeah. And so kind of locally to Pennsylvania, one last kind of run I want to touch on is the Amish. So Amish got into running. What like how? Like it's interesting.
I was always fascinated by Amish people. How they can keep their lifestyle, the way the world changes, and they really keep it simplistic, and they seem happy doing it. So
we agree. We've talked about it on this podcast. We talk about the Amish a lot. Like
so living 70 miles from Lancaster was easy to go out there, and I was always like the spring and the fall were my favorite times to go out when they harvest, and they're using Belgian horses to take down corn in a field instead of power equipment. And the same with planting, when they turn the fields over and can do all the planting. I'm like, how can these people do this for acres and acres upon acres? I'm just astonished by their professionalism and their commitment to their lifestyle and their religion. So I'm always fascinated by it. And then I got this call from a Mennonite guy that these Amish runners want to run with me. And I'm like, what do you mean Amish runners? I had no idea what you're talking about. So he said, oh, there's this group out here that's pretty serious. And they said they absolutely want to run with you. So I said, okay, tell me when and where, and I'll be there. So we met at Jacob's barn, as one Amish runner, Jacob. And they were like first time I went out, there were about 6 to 7 guys, and they were solid runners. I was impressed at what they could run.
What shoes were they using?
They were using more like a minimalist shoe, which was pretty popular at the time, because it was, when I first ran with them was about a year after the Born to Run book came out, the Chris McDougall book. And minimalist shoes were one of the big parts of that book. So anyway, we go out and run, and I was impressed how fast these guys could run. And we ran in the dark. So they did it on a night where there was a full moon, that we got a little bit of moonlight, but it was, we waited till after sunset. Finished the run in Jacob's barn. They bring out homemade ice cream that they made, and we're drinking coffee and eating homemade ice cream at like 11:30 at night.
That's the
And
life.
I'm thinking, oh man, this is awesome. I'll be able to stay awake and get home. I was going to get a hotel room. And then I thought, no, I'm all pumped up on this coffee. I'll be able to drive the whatever hour and a half to get home. So right before I was leaving, they said, you got to come back and do another run with us. And I said to them, I'll come back under one condition, that you convince some of the Amish women to run with us. And if you do that, I'll be back. You tell Jim when the women are ready and I'm ready, I'll return. So it took about 2 months. They got back to me and said, there's some of the women are going to run with us. So I went back out, and I think we had 3 women the first time the second time I ran, and the first time that we had women involved. And the women could really run well. And they had, a dress on that went down to their ankles and up to their neck with a bonnet on. And it was a warm night, and they could run. I was amazed. So I stuck with the women, and we could see the guys up ahead. Everyone had on headlamps, were running in the dark. And they really knew the courses. They knew the farms we were running through. Because they always said, we don't fence in our land, we fence in animals, but not our entire farm. So they knew where we could run and be right in the middle of a farm. And they said, we know these people, so no one's going to bother us. So I just remember we got up on this hill, and the Amish women I was with knew we were close to where we finished, to Jacob's barn. And I'm telling you, when they realized there was only like a half mile to go, they took off and left me like I was stuck in the mud. I couldn't believe how fast they were running. I was like, this is awesome. And then right then I knew this is really going to take off in this community. And then they launched this race that they do in the town called Bird in Hand, a Bird in Hand half marathon. And if you go there now, there's like 400 to almost 500 Amish do the race. And so it really did take off in the community. And a lot of times I'm at a marathon and that are on the East Coast, and some of the Amish are running the race, and they all know me because they all come up to me and say, hey, Mr. Yasso, thanks for convincing us into being runners. So it's really fun to see. It was really to see running transform a community, not just a person. It was really something cool to witness, and it really did work. So the bishop is in charge of the communities, and if the bishop says, I don't want you to do this, they can't do it. So they had some softball teams, and they created like divisions, and they kept score, and they kept who had the most wins and everything. The bishop said no more softball.
Okay.
So they knew with running, don't spoil it. Let's just make sure that we always talk about we run together, and that's what they say Vela Springa, which means run together. So the bishops never come down on them because they tend to do races. They tend to do races that are on a Saturday and not run on Sunday. And they love a race like the Boston Marathon, which is run on a Monday, because they can run on Saturday and then do their religion on Sunday and then race on Monday.
Yeah, that's great. So as you look back through everything under the running world, what's the best part of it all? Connecting with everyone and everything.
It is the culture and the people, and it is, what happened to me. I still can't believe what it did for me. It changed my whole life, became my livelihood. It just didn't seem possible. I've been inducted in the Distance Running Hall of Fame. None of it seemed possible, and it all happened to me. But it all happened to me because of other people. And so when I retired from Runner's World, what do I do with an office? Everyone that visited Runner's World came to my office because there was just stuff everywhere. You couldn't see any wall in my office. It was all stuff. As you can see.
All the artifacts.
All the stuff from Africa, some races from everywhere. So people used to say, oh my God, this stuff is amazing. So on their 31 years, what do I walk out of my door with? Do I take everything? Do I take some stuff? I really took very little, to be honest. I left a lot of stuff there and said, this would be better in like a common room area. There's some cool stuff that was sent to me, but there was some stuff that meant the world to me. So I actually brought the two that mean the most to me. that I felt. I mean, like running with the Amish was something, but I remember, so I did this race in South Africa called the Comrades Marathon, which is they call it a marathon, but it's actually 56 miles. And you have to get in under 12 hours. They don't let you finish after 12 hours. And when I signed up to do it, I was actually really sick. I was really in a battle with Lyme disease. I could barely run. So what I did was I only did a long run, and then I would take like a week off and then try another long run and take another week off. And so I literally only ran something like 20 times in the 6 months leading up to it, because sometimes I'd have to take 2 weeks off. But anyway, I did a local 5K as a charity thing, and then the next morning I'm flying to South Africa. I did this 5K, and I was so slow. I said, oh my God, I can't, there's no way I can carry the pace that I had to do to break the 12 hours for 56 miles. And even though years ago my personal best for 50 miles was 6 hours and 11 minutes, which is like 7:25 per mile pace for 50 miles. I could barely, finish a 5K, to be honest. So I come home and I'm kind of freaked out about going all the way to South Africa to fail at this race. And then I go to my email and I get this email from Bobby McGee. And he knew I was going to Comrades, and he knew I was struggling. So I got this email. It says, hey, friend, great wise sage, you will be in my thoughts when you tackle Comrades. May the warmth of the KwaZulu-Natal and the people of South Africa drive you ever onwards to the finish. Savor every moment as you have taught us to do. Though you have run the greatest marathons and ultras of the world, this is the greatest of all ultras and may rank as up there as the greatest foot race of all time. Being one of the planet's greatest running spirits, you'll be welcomed into its bosom. Even healthy, it examines every fiber of who a runner is. It takes and gives in equal vast amounts. It's a feast of a run with consequences of every unimaginable kind. From the moment you hear the shotgun blast to the imploring hands of the crowd at the finish, you will reaffirm, no matter what, you were born to run this race. Good luck, Bart. May the gods be with you. Draw from that earth, those people, and all those glorious miles you have run on this planet. You will need and love them all. Bobby McGee. And I thought,
Wow.
dang, that is heavy. I was like,
That's beautiful.
yeah, so I said, I got to finish this race just because of Bobby McGee. So I carried that with me the whole way and thinking, I had it tucked in my running shorts in a little plastic thing. And I thought, if I get to the point where I just think I can't go on anymore, I got to get out there and read Bobby's message and continue on. I never got to that where I knew the entire race, I felt like I could finish. And then I got closer to finish. I knew I was under the cutoff. And so I never had to dig it out, but it was always there it was always in the back of my mind, those words he said to me.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, when I retired from Runner's World, I was always asked, what's your message to the running community? And I said, it's a very easy message. All runners, every runner, you inspire somebody. You may not know the person, you may never meet the person, but trust me, you inspire someone. And people always say to me, but I'm the slowest one. And I said, you may inspire more people than the person that won the race, because there's more people that can relate with you than can relate with the guy who won the race or the woman who won the race. I said, so trust me. And I said, I'm going to read a email that was sent to me, and this will prove the point. You may never know the people, meet the people, and it may be the most unlikely person that encounters your life or your running. So one day I get this email. Now this is from the mom sent this to me. It's a young autistic boy who's like 16 at the time. Doesn't talk very much. His mom would say, she said, I would always ask him, what's going on? And, how you feeling? Trying to get, I want to help you. And he would just not say anything. And then she said, one night she asked him what's going on, and he started talking, and she started writing down. And she wrote all this stuff down, what he said about me. And she sent it to me the next day by email. And I was like, so I use this as an example. Now, it was easy for someone to find my email working at Runner's World. At the time, we had 2 million readers, and my email address was in the magazine, so this person could find me. But this is her son's words, this autistic young kid. and he said, so he says this to his mom. I wish I knew why I have no friends. I know that part of it is because I don't understand how to socialize, but I just want friends my own age to like me. I wish Bart Yasso was my age. So obviously, this woman, obviously, she came to some of my talks and her son would be with her. So he really did pay attention to me. He said, he's really a good person, and I think he would be a good friend. He would be okay with me not knowing how to talk to people, and he wouldn't make fun of me for liking video games. And he wouldn't make me feel like I'm awkward because I don't like to talk to people. He would make me feel like I'm not bad. So he says, I wish that other people would want to hang out with me like they hang out with him. I wish I could be around people and socialize with them like he does. I wish I could be Bart Yasso. And then the kids, I'm torn up reading this, putting myself in his shoes, understanding what it's like to be an autistic child. I was torn up, and then he's the greatest closer ever. This kid had the best closing line. It saved me. It brought me back. He said, after he says he really wish he could be Bart Yasso, even if it was just for a day, he says, but I don't want to do all that running crap that he does. So he kind of, as poignant as the whole message was, but it really drove home that point that how would I have ever known that I inspired an autistic child that didn't communicate? I could have never known that. But he watched what I did. And I was just doing my job. Like, I didn't say, okay, I'm going to head out the door and inspire an autistic kid. I was just being me and doing my job. But he tuned into that. He liked that people like coming up to me and talking to me and being social, and and he wished he could be that, but his autism gets in the way. So that's the example I use for runners. And I said, your email address may not be in a magazine that has 2 million readers, so someone may never tell you where this connection is that you inspire, but trust me, you inspire people. So just be yourself, be authentic, and just go out and run.
It's awesome. Absolutely love it. What's your one last question, I guess, and
Sure.
I think it'll tie into what you just said. What's your advice to us as two young kids here, going out into the world? We're excited. What's your advice?
Yeah, so I always say in running, never limit where running could take you, and I mean that physically, geographically, emotionally, spiritually. And I think the same with the podcast. Never limit where this podcast could take you. Never limit to who you can inspire and what community you could create. Whether you're motivating people just to be a better person, a better athlete, living a better life. I think you guys cover so many things, and that's I would say is the most powerful thing you could do. And you guys are already doing it, because I listen to some of your podcasts. So you're not just running, and you do a little bit of everything. And I think that's the power that you have. So go out there, and I could tell from us doing this interview, you guys just are yourselves. You're not setting up to, you didn't tell me to come here and you're going to have all this equipment and we got millions of people, and some people tell me they got millions of people download their podcast. I said, I never even heard of you guys. These people that say they have 1 million followers and stuff. So I like that you guys are authentic and you're doing what you started in the basement.
Yeah.
You just started from scratch, and that's what it's all about. That's the journey. And you have to share that, because it's, you don't start out and do a podcast and then the next thing you know you're on the Today Show getting interviewed for being a podcaster.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. You guys know it's hard work, but it's being authentic, and I like the message you want to get out there to people. That's what it's all about.
Well, we really appreciate that, and it was an honor to be here today with you. Truly, really, the stories are absolutely unbelievable, and it was great sitting down with you. Really.
Oh, thank you, Leo. Thank you, Kyle.
Yeah, thank you. Seriously.
Thank you for being here, guys. The Motive Podcast signing off. Kyle Cohen, Bart Yasso, Leo Kosach. Thank you, guys. Have a great week.